Assalamualaikum and hello everyone. So this is the second video about our current topic, which is HTTP and JSON. So this video will focus on the demo part. Before I start uh, delivering uh, the video or delivering the demo, so I would recommend you to uh, watch this video directly on YouTube. Okay, you start from e-learning, but you want to open directly from YouTube. Okay, there is a reason why I recommended that, uh, and I also recommend you to set the playback to 1.5 times speed. And then because this video is quite long, so you can navigate from one scene to another by using the timestamp that you can find from the description box of the video. This one can only be seen if you are watching the video directly on YouTube. So let's get started. What we are going to do today, yeah, it's all about the demo for this topic. Okay, whereby we are going to continue the project that we had last time, which is still on the peer and self-assessment application. What we are going to do for this application, we are going to change the way we access the data. Instead of having hard-coded data, we are going to fetch the data from JSON, okay, in which we can access it from in our case from on internet, and the other one next, or for the final version in this demo, we are going to access data from a fax server. Okay, so the outline for this demo, I divide the demo into, first we are going to add conversion methods to the model classes. Conversion methods here, I mean something like from JSON and to JSON, and then we are going to add to our classes, like in our form, in our assessment activity, assessment and group member. Okay, then the first task, second task will be fetching data from the internet. Okay, and then we are going to modify our UI to use FutureBuilder Widget. Also, I add a subtopic that related to this topic, which is about REST. Okay, which is something to do with the communication for network application. So we are going to see that later. I need to introduce REST because after that we are going to fetch data from an API server, whereby this task you need to understand REST. Okay, because we are going to use this standard for the communication part. Okay, let's take a look at the demo that we are going to to do in this demo, the demo application that we are going to do for this application. In fact, we are going to continue from the previous project, as I mentioned earlier on, which is you can refer the previous project from my GitHub repository under the name navigation underscore name routes. So it is basically the same PSA application, peer and self-assessment, whereby we have two screens, the summary screen and also the detail screen. Okay, but unlike previous application, this time we are going to fetch data from outside, mainly from the internet. Okay, so in this case we are going to learn we are going to apply or to use that HTTP package, which is the main package for accessing data from the internet. And also we are going to implement or to use JSON to assist the way we store the data delivered on the internet. Okay, I have given the lecture on that two topics in previous video. Okay. So in this video we are going to implement that two topics. Okay. Okay, now we can get started. Now you can get prepared your VS Code open. You get ready your emulator, and then as usual you are going to use the code base that I already prepared. Okay, you can download from or you can clone it from this URL. Download from this GitHub repo. You clone from here. Just you open your git bash and then you clone from here. Okay, by invoking this command, later you will have a folder called http JSON. That one is your project, and then you can go inside and open VS Code from there. And then the repo has several branches that I already created to help us in doing this tutorial. Okay, so you can start from any code base you like, depending on what topic that you want to check out. Okay, so in that case we have 4 branches, but later on we are going to start from this part. Okay, instead of starting from the beginning, we are going to start from this repository, fetch from internet code base. Okay, we are going, so in order to do that, you need to invoke this command in your git bash, git checkout, and then you type the code branch here. The way you want to do it is just okay, maybe I can show you from my screen. Okay, now I am in my VS Code. Okay, so you can use actually external git bash. As usual, you just go to your folder and then you right click, open git bash from there. But in my case, I prefer to use terminal directly from the VS Code. In order to open this, you can simply press Ctrl J, and go to terminal. Okay, this is Ctrl J, we'll close that. Ctrl J, you open terminal, or you can go to terminal, open the terminal, or you can just press Ctrl backtick. The backtick is underneath the escape key. Okay, so in fact I have invoked my git checkout, but to show you, we are going to start from, okay, you just need to type some parts of the word and then you press tab to do auto completion, and then fetch. Okay, from just now I just type fetch and then press tab. So from internet and then I press tab, so we have auto completion here. So we are going to start from this branch. Okay, I already did that, so I don't have to do it again here. You can see from you can see from this. Okay, now I am inside this branch, or you can also see from the VS Code. Now I am inside the fetch from internet code base branch. Okay, so now we can get started. Okay, in fact I already opened the code and run it, and then this is the first result. Okay, in fact this is the same what we have from previous application. Okay, the last project. The first thing that we need to do for this project is basically to add conversion for each of the model classes. Okay, but before we proceed, let's coming back to the slide. I forgot to mention here, I forgot to explain the last one. Okay, since we are going to do this video in a tutorial base, so you may want to follow along the coding process. So some parts, I think most of the part you are going to do copy and paste. I try to do different style this time, because if I do the coding line by line, it will take so many times. It will take the video will be quite long. So what I'm going to do, maybe the first, second, and third task we are going to do just copy and paste, and I will explain from there. I will explain, or I will highlight some the most significant or the most important points from the parts we are doing. So in order to code along, you want to copy the code from this what we call GitHub GIS. Okay, so you just click on this, and you're supposed to be taken to this site. Okay, which is we are what you want to do next is basically you need to copy the entire file. Let's say for the first task, we are going to add conversion method to the model, and then after that we are going to test that method. So in order to do that, you need to do some changes on some parts of your code. In this case, you need to change the data.dat. So what you want to do is basically just copy this. Okay, you point your cursor here, just press, go here, shift, go here. Okay, and then Control C, and then you are going to copy the entire file. Okay, this is actually to minimize a typo error. Instead of typing part of the code, you just simply replace the entire code for the particular file. So I'm going to explain the points that are more important. So we are going to do that later. Okay, hello. So let's going back to part. Okay, this part. Okay, okay. Again, this is you just need to click on this to go to uh, the source code in order for you to do copy and paste. Okay. Okay. Again, I would like to revisit this application before we start doing the coding, so that you can recall to get a better understanding for what actually we are doing here. Okay, so our application is about peer and assessment application. It consists of two screens. The main screen, this is the main screen, and then there is another screen which is the detail screen, whereby the detail screen will show up when we click on this, which the detail screen will show the details of the evaluations. So I want to point out about the application data. Okay, in fact, this one is just a revisit. Okay, so this is our data. We have and then all this will be our model classes. Okay, so that means we have uh, uh, we have several classes here to represent our model or our data: evaluator, criterion, and also scale. Again, here we have assessment. So we have at least four model class. So for evaluator, this data will be used for the title in the main screen, and also actually for the next screen. And then for the assessment basically is a list of assessment. Okay, whereby for each assessment it has a member, and also this is the points, which is the evaluation earned by this member. Okay, then this is for the second screen. Second screen is the detail about the evaluation for particular member. So it uses two data collection of data, which first is the criteria. Okay, criteria will be used here, and then the scale is the scale used for each criterion. Okay, so this is basically our data representation. Okay, so I hope you are very clear with the data structure we are using for this application. Okay, so that you can follow along, you don't get lost during the demo. And then we are going to represent all this data into a JSON form. Okay, you learn from my previous lecture. JSON basically a string of data which is organized in a form of keys, key value pairs. Okay, so in our case, we are going to store everything, to store all the objects, the evaluator, assessment, criteria, in a single JSON. Okay, please recall when we talk about JSON here, you keep in mind you have two types of JSON. is to form the first one that we obtain directly from the server, which is a string JSON, and then the one that you receive after reading or fetching from the outside is a map JSON or a parse JSON. Okay. In any case, basically we are storing all the objects in a single JSON object. The reason for this is because it's just for simplicity, just for demonstration for purposes, because we want to focus on the how to utilize JSON rather than the design itself. Okay. So the first part we are going, or the first task that we are going to do in this demo is to add the conversion model, to add the conversion methods to each of the models. So we are going to add from JSON method and also add to JSON method. Okay, so okay, let's take a look at our code. Okay, I suppose you already get check out on fetch from internet code base. For adding the two methods, actually, in fact, we the branch has already have it. Okay, so we need our model classes are group member. We from previous lecture, from previous project, we already have this copy, but for this lecture we are adding these two new. Okay, so from JSON is used for decoding, which is for the serialization. That means once you get data from the outside, you have a method, you have a JSON in a map format, and then you want to convert into object. Okay. Okay. I hope you can recall the reason we need this is actually for second conversion. We need to convert from map into object so that we can have type checking during the compilation time. And then the opposite method, this is to JSON. This is the format. Okay. Just to show you an example here, just here we are going to add from JSON for group member. The object has two attributes, short name and full name. So you simply basically convert from JSON into attribute, which is the data structure for an object. And then for the to JSON method, you just do the opposite. Okay. So the same applies to the rest of the object, the classes. We have in assessment we have group member and also assessment. Okay, assessment is for a single row, so it consists of group member, as you can see here, group member. Then this is actually a nested object. So in my previous video, I have shown you how to deal with that. If you have nested object, you basically need to have dedicated from JSON for this for the nested object, something like this. So let's see. As you can see here, first we want to convert for member is an object. So what you want to do here is actually you just call to the from JSON of this class. Okay, this is how you deal with the nested object. Okay, member is nested object inside the assessment. And then this one is for the array. Okay, as you can see here, we are actually doing the spread operator here because we don't want to point to, okay, because an array is a pointer. If you simply use JSON points, that basically points is pointing to the same point. So here actually we are cloning. We are cloning a new array, okay, by copying all the elements from JSON points. And then for the to JSON, you do the opposite. You just simply call the opposite method, like member, because member is a nested, so you can call member to JSON. Okay. Okay, then in fact here you can simply write just member. Okay, this is actually and then the same goes to this. You don't have to spread, you just simply use points. Why? Because later on we are going to use JSON encode, and then that function will intelligently knows how to deal with nested and array. Okay, but if you use the same something like this, it's supposed to be the same. So because member is going to change into another map. Okay. Okay, we can remain as is. Okay, for this. Okay, and then the rest, what else? I think we also have another one in, I think, yeah, this one, inform. We do the same, okay, from JSON to JSON, and then we introduce variable here for scales and also for criteria and the criteria. So and then inside, again, I think inside data, this is the just hard-coded data here. Okay, so we done for the first part, which is about adding the conversion method for each model class. And then after that, next we are going to test the method, okay, to make sure the method is working. So we are going to test JSON decoding for this serialization, but this time we just, okay, for now we don't have any JSON yet. So later we are going to create a dummy JSON, which is hard-coded JSON, and then it is already in past JSON data, because we want to test out the reading, which is the decoding, and we also need to test out the to JSON. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so we need to replace our data, okay, because currently our data is we specify directly in object. There is no JSON here. We are going to replace this with JSON data. Okay. Okay. Before we do that, before we do the testing, let me explain regarding the data structure again. So to test out, we need JSON, right? So currently this is our data. Just now what we have is model, our model here. From previous implementation, we already have the model and the data is there. Okay. But next we are going to replace the model, the data for the model by reading from JSON. Okay. The JSON supposed to be coming from the outside world, from the, let's say, from the HTTP, and then we're supposed to be getting a string because JSON is always a string, right? And then to test out, we need to read this string, to fetch this string so that it can arrive in our application. But still, it is still in string. We are going to do that with HTTP package, but not in this section. The way we want to test out our from JSON and to JSON, our from JSON method is that to have a pass JSON. So in this case, I'm going to create a dummy or a hard-coded pass JSON. Okay, so the way we want to do it is basically this one. Okay, because currently the data is already in the form of this. There is no JSON here, but this is already an object. Okay, we are going to replace this with the code. So what we want to do, we simply copy this and then we replace the entire, Control A, delete, and then we paste here. Okay, as you can see here, now the data is no longer an object, but the data is a map. Okay, because okay, as you learn, whereby what we want to deal here is pass JSON is basically is a map object. In case of that, it's a map, right? So this is, we assume we already received the data from the server, and then there is a process converting the string into map. So we are currently at this point. Okay, we already have the map. So what we want to do, because here we just need to test out our to JSON. So we just invoke the here for evaluator. We simply group member and then we fetch from evaluator. Okay, and of course we need to convert from JSON because JSON evaluator is a map. Then convert into object by using group.member, a group member dot from JSON. And for the list, okay, we are going to use iteration here. Okay, in previous video I have shown you several ways of dealing with a list, starting from by using regular array, regular iteration by using counter, and then next I was showing you by using the for each high order, and finally the most recommended one is by using map. If you lost in this part, I suggest you try to take a look at the previous lecture. Okay, so here this is how we deal with a list, because assessment is a list of assessment. And we also need to, okay, for now let's try this out. Okay, okay, I think to simplify or to simplify the process, we copy the code both, and then we test this out at once. Okay, and uh, so from to JSON, we have a way already here how to test it. We simply use it or call it in as global variables here. But from to JSON, the way we want to deal with it, we need somehow to call this method, right? But where should we put that? So in this case, we are going to call to JSON in the main function. Okay? So what we want to do here is just copy this. Basically, we just need to have this one. Okay, we need to add this one. So I'm going to copy this, or you can simply actually do the same. You copy everything and replace the entire code of the main dot. So I'm going to do this, copy this part, and then I'm going to open the main file. As you can see here, currently we are using arrows syntax. So for arrow syntax, it can only be used with one statement, which is in this case is run app. So but next I'm going to add more statement in main function. So I need to use a regular block, something like this. Then now I can put my testing here. Okay, this is just to test out the evaluator. Okay, evaluator just now we have in data.dat. So but we didn't link yet, so we need to import. Okay, and also since we are using JSON decode, I think we also need to import data and data convert, and also data.dat. Okay, I think we are good now. Okay, then we can test this out. Okay, we can test this out. Okay, I can refresh by pressing hot restart. So this is the result after I hot restarted. So it will be the same result because we don't change the data. What we change only the way we get the data. Instead of getting directly from the object, we are getting the data from a map or a past JSON. And when you go to the debug console, you can see this is the output from the JSON decode. Okay, from here we do it one by one. JSON evaluator, JSON assessment, do it in that way. Okay, I forgot, you also need actually to print out JSON scales, JSON form, JSON scales and JSON criteria. But I think you got the point. So here, as you can see here, we don't see any function or any method call with to JSON. Why? Because JSON encode will automatically call the to JSON for the for the object. So that one will be called directly, or will be called automatically by the JSON encode. Okay, so this is how we test our conversion method. Okay, next task, we are going to change or modify the code so that it will fetch data from internet. Okay, just now we are using hard-coded. Okay, so in this task, or in this section, we are going to assume the string JSON that received by the client has already been pre-processed by the backend. Okay, what I mean by this, so for example, all the lookup fields have been resolved to their details data. So lookup fields basically something like ID, right? Okay. I think let's see next to I will explain this more later in the next slide. So in order to mimic this process, what we are going to assume here, we simply assume that the data we receive is a JSON, a string JSON, but the JSON data has already have complete information. We don't have to do we don't have to do anything on the data. Okay, so the way we do that here, we create the JSON file manually first, and then we host the file on a web. Okay, just to mimic the process of lookup field resolution has been done. So let's take a look what I mean about lookup field resolution. So let's say client requests this assessment activity by sending this request. Okay, and then once we send this, we're supposed to receive this kind of data, which is in a form of JSON. But what I want to highlight here, the lookup field like member ID. Okay, the main data give us member ID, but we don't need the member ID. What we need is basically the actual information about the member. However, in the database, the member is stored for particular activity is stored as an ID. So if we use this directly in our application, now it breaks our UI because we need member name rather than the member ID. So in that case, we need to get full information about the member. So the process we need to do for that is basically we call it lookup field resolution, whereby we want to resolve the field, the lookup ID into the details information. So something like member ID here, we need to expand it to the member object. Okay, so the same goes to the remaining field. We also need to resolve it into the details. Okay, so this is what we call lookup resolution. Okay, so of course we are not going to do that in this demo. Instead, we are in this section, we assume the lookup field resolution is already done by the backend side. Okay, we just want to deal with the reading the JSON. We don't do that. We assume we don't do lookup field resolution here. We assume it has been done by the server. So this is what I mean here. So we assume the data something like this, right? Just now what we did for this lookup resolution, when the client send request to the server, the raw data from the database is some form of data with lookup ID. So what I mean, the lookup resolution has been done by the server is basically this part. Okay, before sending the data or the response to the client. We have a script at the back end. This is actually the job should be done by the back end, which is the back end developer. He or she need to implement the resolution here. Before responding to the client, we need to do resolution at this part. Okay, this part we are going the script need to do resolution. That means in order to do that, it will send several requests. So just now we first send request to get the assessment activity. Then you get a list of members, but the members only, each member only has ID. Then you need to send another the first one here, and then this guy respond the result, and then the script also need to send back another request to do the resolution. So if you have another lookup ID, then you need to send another request to the database. Okay, so what we assume here is that the data that sent to the client is already in the form of a complete JSON data. All the lookup field has been resolved. That our assumption for the next demo. Okay, okay, we assume the data we received from the server is already been resolved. So the way we do it here is basically by manually created the JSON string file. Okay, so then we going to host the string JSON online. So we need to host that JSON data online. So there are a couple of ways of doing that. So I can use this just to store string JSON. You can go to this website moki.io. Okay, so I don't think so. I need to explain you to this. It's really easy to use this website. You just go here, and then intuitively you can know how to proceed from there. However, I already create demo the file, and then I already posted on this website. Okay, so the data is something like this. We can go here. Okay, I click here. This is the data that I manually created and then host on Moki.io. Okay, as you can see, as I mentioned just now, we put everything into a single JSON file. Okay, it consists of evaluator, assessments, scales, and criteria. Okay, so for this task, fetching data from internet, we are going to do it step by step. Meaning that I'm going to show you from part by part here. First, I'm going to show you by using global data. The reason being is that I don't want to change so much code from previous code, so we can progressively move forward. We are going to start with using global variables approach, even though this one is not a recommended one. Actually, you need to you want to avoid from using this approach in doing software development, but in this case just for demonstration purpose only. After that, we are going to use the approach by passing data from one screen to another. I think this one actually to make it more modular rather than using global. And then finally is maintaining the same passing data, but now we are going to use FutureBuilder. This is one of uh, strategy to deal with future data. Okay, there is a dedicated widget that relies on future data. Okay, uh, why this is important? Because later on we are going to use HTTP to grab data from online. HTTP is giving us result as future. Okay, future basically data type, another data type that is used when you are dealing with non-blocking uh, code. Okay, but for now you take it is just a future is just another type of another data type. Okay, uh, that can be received uh, some point in the future. Okay, okay, this is the first one we are going to implement to read data from the internet, uh, but we are going to uh, read using the global approach. So let me walk you through about this approach. What we are going to do, actually we are going to, first of all, we are going to implement the fetch data, whereby fetch data is a method, is a function utilizing HTTP package. As the name implies, fetch data is basically to fetch data. We are going to fetch data from the internet, and then where we put the fetch data, for this case global approach, we are going to fetch data inside main. Okay, because to some extent we need to trigger, we need to start running this data, this method. Okay, the way we are going to do that in this demo is by putting it inside the main function. And fetch data basically just fetch data from online, and then give the data is in form of string, and then we are going to decode in, make it a map, and after that convert it into an object like the one we did just now, but this time we are going to read directly from online. What I want to highlight here, the data here now inside in the data, which is the evaluator, assessment criteria, and scales, are still global variables. Basically, the previous implementation we did just now is in this form. It's a global variables. That means all parts of the code can access directly to the data. Okay. Although this is, I think, we are we tempted to use this because it's very easy to implement this way, but actually in software development it is a very big no way to follow this approach. But just for demonstration purpose only for this one, because we just want to continue what we have so far, we are going to also going to use this approach in this demo. Okay, but of course in your project, in your real application, you don't want to use global approach, okay, because you may end up with what we call spaghetti program. Okay, so this how the data should look like, how they are referenced. Everything from the code can reference to the data. So let's go back to the code. Next, we are going to implement the fetch data function to fetch data from online. So here we need HTTP package and some other global variables. Actually, we already have our global variables here. Okay, this is our global variables, evaluator, assessment, and also we have inside the form we have scales and criteria. So let's go to the snippet here. So this is the task 2A, which is fetching data from internet using global data. So first of all, we need to define the fetch data function. Okay, just a convenience function here. Instead of using directly the HTTP, you can also use that actually. But I prefer to create a new another function to facilitate the fetching. Okay, so this is actually the one that we need. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, as usual, you can simply copy everything, yeah, and then you replace the entire code from data.dat. But here I'm going to show you step by step. First of all, we need to consolidate all the global variables. So just now we already have evaluator and assessment, but scales is inside form, so we need to bring scales from there. Okay, we put here, we consolidate into data. So I'm going to have this, and also okay, I'm going back. I will be coming back to this part. We are going to copy this, and then I need to replace this. We no longer need to have this. Also this one, I think we can get rid everything. Okay, to this point. Okay, so also actually, and then as you can see here, it need dependency. Scales comes from form. Can remove this. Okay, so now we bring this here. So that means inside the form models form. Okay, I can remove this one because inside we have these two variables now inside data.dat. Okay, we're done with that. Okay, now I'm going to instead of copying and pasting here, I'm going to do it step by step because I want to explain some very important things here. Okay, so what we want to do here is basically something like fetch data. I'm going to design my fetch data something like this, whereby this fetch data, to make it more generic, I will pass the URL, okay, which is the location where the data that we are going to fetch from online. Okay, the logic for this is something like this. Okay, we are going to use which is HTTP get. Here get, we are sending get request. Then when you send get request here, then you need to specify the parameter, which is the parameter is the URL itself. Okay, and then because we don't send any body, so we don't need to worry about the body, because the second part is supposed to be the body and header, the header. So normally you are going to do something like this. Okay, content type, and then here we are going to send application.json, right? But we don't have we don't need to, that means when we tell this request something like this, that means if we send a body later, the body is supposed to be in JSON format, but since we are not sending body, we just send the URL, so this is supposed to be enough. Okay, now we get an error here. Okay, why? Because we need HTTP. HTTP is a it's not built in directly in that package, so you need to import it. So the way you want to import it, you need to go to this pubspec YAML. Okay, I believe I already have it here. Okay, no, we don't have. We already have this. Okay, I already have here. In your case, if you don't have this dependency HTTP, you need to add in your abstract YAML. Okay, but this is a no. Let's say I remove this. Okay, let's remove, assuming we don't have this. Okay. Okay, inside data. Okay, we by the way, let's try to save it first. Okay, so we need to add dependency to our project, which is we need HTTP package. You can add manually from pubspec YAML here. You add, or a better way of doing this by using the ESCO extension. Okay, you need to install this extension. I have I think the extension, if you don't have it, to try type pub assist. This one, pubspec assist, I already have installed in my PC here. Okay, this is another convenience extension whereby we can use it for add pubscaml. So you simply search from here, say HTTP. Okay, I want to add HTTP, and then it will go to that package online, try to search the repository, and then try to find, this is the list that match with our search. So in our case, we are going to use this package. Then it will be adding automatically inside our pubspec YAML. Okay, this one. Okay, it will be added. Supposed to be here. Okay, let's wait until this pubspec update run. Okay, at this moment it seems it doesn't work yet, because I believe because we still got some errors on our code. I need to fix the errors first, and then do the pub assist again. So let's take a look what we have here. We got error on details.py. Okay, but for now, let me comment this out first. Okay, and then for the scales details, Now we have dependency problem here. Scales, it doesn't recognize because scales now inside data, no longer previously inside, it is inside form, so no longer needed. We need to update this. Okay, and again here form data unused, so you can remove. We can remove this, remove unused import. Anything else? I think we are good now. Okay, let me check again, and then we add with HTTP. Okay, okay. We need to wait again, so let me pause the video until the pubs get complete. Now HTTP package has been added here, so I just want to remind you regarding what we did just now. Okay, when you add pubspec YAML, it basically just to tell Dart to download the data from outside, from the package repository. It's similar to, if you're familiar with npm Node.js, it's similar to npm. Okay, so once you download it, you still need to write the import here. This is actually the one that you include locally. Okay, so what I'm going to do for fetch data is basically something like this. Okay, by the way, I need, because this data I'm going to this is the pseudocode. We are going to http get and then provide the URL. Okay, so http get is returning a future. Okay, I think to make it clear, let us import the package first, d.http, which in this case we are going to import. Okay, why don't we just copy this one, because we cannot, for this package, we cannot use the suggestion. Flutter doesn't have suggestion to import that package. Okay, so you need to do it manually, something like this. And I already mentioned in my previous video, you get this convention in using this package by put alias, so that the name that we have inside this package will not conflict with other names, because this package actually is not a class, it is just a regular function. If I don't use this, so here I simply use get. Okay, because get is inside this package, but to avoid conflict with other packages, maybe other packages also use get, the name get inside their package. So that's why we use alias here. Okay, by convention is HTTP. So that means when we write something like this, that means we are using get from this HTTP. Okay, so let's take a look what we have inside get. As you can see here, get, this is the process of sending request, get request to the HTTP server, and then it will respond with the response, right? Okay, so but it is in the form of future. Okay, because the response, we invoke this command here, but the result will be not coming immediately. So that's the sort of future. So the future is actually the data is coming not immediately, but we assume it will be coming here in the future. So this is a non-block. So since it returns a future, we need to grab. You cannot simply use something like this, okay? Because string is the result of get is a future, but we simply use we can use here final response, okay? Final response. So this is okay, we can actually indicate this with response, okay, the data type from this package, okay, to make it more clear, or you can simply ignore this. That means that the type will be inferred dynamically later on by that. Or if you want to be more descriptive, you explicitly write the type here, okay, which is response. Now, but we got error here, okay, because the here get should return a future, but we don't send a future. So you might be thinking you want to do something like this, okay, it works, okay. And then later on, if you want to deal, so when we want to deal with response, so now response now is a future. So here this you are going to use something like .then. It's not really convenient working with .then. Okay, last time I think in my past two videos I have mentioned regarding asynchronous programming. You have basically two styles of doing asynchronous programming. The first side the first style is by using .then, okay, response.then. But there is a more elegant and more intuitive way of using non-blocking programming is by using await async, whereby your code is running as non-block code, but still you write the code, you look at the code as a blocking code, just the way you are familiar with. Okay, so the way we want to do it here, instead of using future, I don't want to use future here. So I replace that with await. Okay. Okay, now this part now becomes what we call asynchronous operation. This is a synchronous operation. Okay. A synchronous operation can only be put inside a synchronous function. So this is not a synchronous function. We put this code inside fetch data. Our function is fetch data, but this now is not a synchronous function. So we need to make sure fetch data is also a synchronous function, because we need inside the body we need to have a synchronous code. So how to label this as asynchronous? Make it this function to be a synchronous function. The way you want to do it is simply putting a sync here. Okay, you put the body, you label the body of this function as a sync. Now we solve the problem. Okay, we can write asynchronous programming, but it looks like just regular synchronous programming. So what we want to do next here is basically to process the response. Okay, please recall the slide regarding how request and response for HTTP works. You send request and then the response will be coming back. Inside the response we have the status code, right? to indicate whether the request has been successfully served. Okay, so we just need to, okay, I think the main point that I want to highlight already there. So let's copy this, the entire function. Okay, I just replace this. This is supposed to be the same now. Okay, so okay, just now we have a thing. If you make a function to be asynchronous, by default the return value must be future. If you don't put future here, it is basically the same future, because this already tell that one is a future. Okay, asynchronous programming always return a future. Okay, this is just for the code. This is just for debugging. Okay, we have something like this. I can also put final here. Okay, in fact I don't have to use this if I don't want to, because it will be input automatically right here. So we did this just now, and then another. Okay, so response is the response from the server. Okay, please recall what we learned from the previous lecture. In response, you have the status code and also the response body. First of all, we need to check at the status code. Okay, so in fact, in a good practice, you need to do checking here, something like if response status code not equal to 100, because 200 is okay, right? This is the reply from get when this. If not, okay, what you want to do here, you just throw response. Okay, that means we don't want to proceed. When you throw an exception, the remaining code will be skipped, right? But this is a good practice. You always want to check the result of your request response, the response of the from the client and the server, because you cannot guarantee whether your request has successful or not. But for this demonstration purpose, we don't care about that. We assume we are doing everything in the right way, we are sending the right URL and so on, so we don't do that for this moment. Okay, here I'm using JSON decode. Okay, you can use the object, or you can simply use the function. Okay, let me show you. Okay, first of all, we need to fix this. This is supposed to be imported from data convert. Okay, so far I didn't show you this approach, but basically this is the same, because JSON decode is just a shorthand for JSON.decode. It is the same. Okay, so JSON decode will be getting data from string JSON. Where we get the string JSON is handled or taking from the response of the HTTP. Okay, so we take from here and then we bring to the JSON decode, and then JSON decode will convert the string into map. Okay, and then we put into JSON. Okay, please be noted here, when we refer to underscore JSON, it means it's a past JSON. So JSON underscore JSON is a past JSON or a map JSON. Okay. And then we can consume our conversion method, okay, like evaluator. This is the same what we did from previous slide, whereby we do conversion inside the main. We do the same here. Okay, this is the conversion. Okay, now we're done for the fetching part. Okay, next is about to put this code in main function. Okay, so in the main function, is basically we just need to call the fetch data. Okay, and then keep in mind, fetch data, just now we design it to read the data and put everything into a global variable. So what we want to do is just copy this, and I'm going to put inside my main function, which is I believe I can put here. Need to close this. I need to go to where is it? Let me check. I'm thinking, yeah, from here. We go to main. Yeah. We just need to replace this. This is the code that we have just now. We just replace. Or if you don't want to follow this, what you can do, you just copy everything from the snippet and then replace all the code inside main. Okay, I'm going to put here. Okay, this, see why I need to use await here, because I want to make sure, okay, we only want to run f after we finish getting the data. That's why I need to use await here. Okay, so again it gives us this error because why? Now this part is a synchronous code. Okay? You can only put a wait code or synchronous code inside a synchronous function. So that means you need to convert this main into asynchronous by having asynchronous here. Okay, now it solves the problem, and then we no longer need this, so we can remove unused. What else? Okay, the data is already here, so we can start running the program again. Okay, I will resume. I will pause the video first. Okay, the program now has completely completely restarted. So now this is the result. As you can see here, it shows us this is the fetching data from online. Okay, we just now we put debugging. Okay, here, this one, the debugging part. Just now we have debugging part here. Okay, where is it? Fetching data complete. Fetching data from this, and then okay, so this is the result of the I restarted the program. In fact, just now I was pausing this video around about 1 hour something, 1 hour and I think 1 hour and 30 minutes, something like that. I was having a problem. If you can recall, just now before I pause the video, I got problem regarding the fetching. So I was thinking the problem might be due to this link. I thought it was already expired, so I was suggesting, and then I was trying with a new one, okay, the backup one, but still uh it was giving me the same result. I got error, an exception error, and then it says it cannot resolve the the DNS. Okay, and then for this debug console, I just got only the first line. Okay, the message fetching from this. I think yeah, from here was from, yeah, this one. And then I don't get this message. That means the request is successfully sent to the server. However, the server doesn't reply. Okay, so because I just now I didn't get the second line. Okay, so after checking 1 hour and 1 hour and so I found that it was not the problem from the code, but from the emulator. Then I dive deeper to the problem. It was the network. Okay, my emulator doesn't connect to network. Then since this emulator is run on top of my PC, I try to check on my desktop. I run it. I try to Google to make sure I am on internet I am on online. It seems it works fine. There is nothing problem uh, with the connectivity to the internet. So I was wondering what's the problem, because the internet is there. And then after googling, and then I found some solutions from Stack Overflow. They said you need to wipe your emulator. I tried that one also, and then but in my case the real culprit is my Wi-Fi network. So what I did to solve the problem, I need to restart the Wi-Fi, the router. Okay, so once I do that, then now everything is coming back to normal situation. I now can have my emulator online. Okay, so I already wasted my time almost 2 hours just to solve the problem. So things happen. So yeah, so I learned something also this today. So let's continue. So I believe we completed the task 2A. So now I can commit. In fact, I already committed. I can type I commit this. I commit this task to make sure I save that one. Okay, now let's go back the slide. Okay, just now what we did is basically this one, fetching on main, and then this fetching the fetch data function is storing the data as global data. Okay, so the summer screen is accessing from the global data, and the summary screen accessing from the global data. The same goes to details. Okay, details needs to access to criteria and cells. Summary needs the evaluator and assessment names. And then later on, when the user is clicks on one of the list item, and then it also send the assessment, a particular assessment, to the details screen. So we are done with the first task. This task fetch from internet by using global approach. Next, we are going to do the same, fetching data from internet, but this time you are going to restructure our code such that now we are using we are not using anymore the global approach. Instead, we are trying to convert that into a modular a more modular one by having the fetching data or the state, which is the global variables just now, will be putting inside some screen instead of having them to be globals. So it should be looking something like this. Now fetching data we are going to call from summer screen. Just now we are calling it from the main. Okay, and then what happened next? What happened next is the detail screen now get data from summer screen, not directly from global variables. This is actually more or better approach when you develop application. You try to do what we call decoupling. Okay? You don't want to each part of code to be bound or to be tied to each other. So modular approach is better than global. So now we are going to implement this. Okay, so what we want to change next is this module, this function fetch data, because just now fetch data is storing data to globals, right? But now what we want to do is this fetch data only returns a map, and then we read, because evaluator now is no longer about a global. Evaluator is now inside summary. We are going to do decode JSON inside summary. So fetch data, instead of a void function, fetch data later will be a function that returns a JSON or a past JSON data. Okay, so let's move going back to the code. Okay, now we are in the code. So what we want to do is, okay, let's take a look at the task 2A, fetching data from internet using task 2B using passing data. Okay, so basically what we need to change is summary, because we need to put our fetching inside here now. Okay, and also okay, we also need to change details. Okay, why? Because as you can see here, details now not getting data from the global variables, but now it gets from the summary screen. Okay, so just now in previous implementation we don't have to pass data, so the detail screen has no constructor parameter because it access directly to the global variables. Now because the next implementation we are going to pass criteria and cells through parameters, so we also need to change the detail screen. Okay, so I think to move faster, that we are going to do just copy and paste. Okay, so let's start with this one, what we need to change on the screen. By the way, we can start with module data here. What we want to change here, only this part, the fetch data. Okay, in our previous or in our current implementation, fetch data is just a, okay, let's take a look what we have in fetch data. See here is a void, because the data is read and then set to global variables. Evaluate to assessment, everything is a global variables. Now we are going to change this. Okay, we are going to change this, okay, by first we no longer use this here, because we are not going to use anymore the global variables. Instead, these variables later will be inside the summary screen. Okay, no longer as a global, but we are going to put here in summary screen. Okay, so in order to do that, I think let me just copy this, so to shorten this video. So okay, what we change just actually this one. Okay, instead of setting everything inside here, now we are going to return a JSON map or pass JSON, this one. Okay, so I'm going to copy this. Okay, okay, you can also do the same. So and then I just replace everything, okay, here. So as you can see here, yeah, instead of specifying global variables here, we only return the map. Okay, we read from HTTP. HTTP gives us the string, this one, and then we decode the string to make it a map, and then we return the map to the caller. Okay, that's it. Let the caller do the conversion process. Okay, so now as you can see here, now we no longer need to use the global variables. We done with this. Okay, then when we go to our other code, you can see that now we break so many codes here, so many parts. Like for the screen, okay, for the screen, because the screen for summary, okay, for summary we don't change it anymore. Okay, for details, for summary we don't change it yet, but for details now it has we break the code now. Okay, because just now it depends on global variables from data, but here we no longer need to use data, so can remove this. Okay, we can remove this. What else we need to do? And also, as you can see here, this actually doesn't recognize anymore criteria, because we already removed from data. Just now is a global. So what we need to change on details is basically we need to provide constructor parameters to allow this, to allow it accepting data sent by the summary screen, because we are going to change this approach. Instead of using global data screen, later we'll be using data from the summary screen. So we can go ahead to change detail screen. So I'm not going to code byte by byte for that. So in order I just point out the what changes we made for that particular part. So here we simply copy everything, okay, and then we change the details here. We change everything and then replace with this. Okay, so as you can see here now, just now the criteria, it depends on the criteria, right? But criteria just now is coming from global variables, but now it depends on this, okay, from the constructor parameter. We send from the parameter. Okay, now since we change here, now it breaks the summary, okay? Because summary also need to okay, the summary. Okay, let's take a look what we have in summary. What we need to do summary, when you look at the diagram here, okay, the widget tree. So we are going to do fetching the data inside the summary. So that means the data is coming inside from the summary screen, and then this variable now is live inside summary. So we need to declare this variable, and then fetching data, we are going to do it here. So the same go to this. I'm going to only copy the code summary.dat here, but I already pointed out what changes that we need to do for this part. Okay, let's go to our code. I'm going to the summary, and then I delete this, put here. So you can see here now we have so many errors here. Okay, I'm going to fix that up first. My mistake, I was pasting on a different file. It's supposed to be inside summary, but I was pasting on main.dat, so I will need to fix this first. Okay, what I did just now, I was undoing inside the main.dat. Now I'm going to paste it again here inside. Hopefully, yeah, I'm now correct in summary.dat. Paste the correct one. By the way, let me undo it first. Okay, so let's take a look in existing implementation. Okay, take a look here. Previously, we are using stateless widget, okay, because this screen is only need to be boot once, right? Okay, I think last time we have discussed this. For this particular screen, it's better to be a stateless rather than stateful, because the changes only on this what we call that circular avatar, but it doesn't change the entire screen. The screen itself is fixed. We only build once, so that's why for this for the previous implementation, we are using stateless. In fact, for this case, summary screen is better to be implemented with stateless. Okay, so now let me press again the new version. Okay, okay, take a look at this now. Here, although the summary screen is best to be implemented with stateless, because there is no point to re-render or rebuild the screen once it's already there, right? Because the changes only happen for this particular circular avatar, right? So the circular avatar needs to be stateful, but not the stateless widget. However, for this case, we have no choice. We need to make summary screen. Okay, we need to make summary screen as stateful. Why? Because the screen needs to be rendered once the data get arrived, right? So we need to somehow, to some extent, to figure out when the data is arrived. Okay, so in that case, we only want to render this summary screen when the data is arrived. Okay, so we want to make sure the data is there, then we can start rebuild our screen. So that's the reason why we need stateful widget. Okay, let me be more clear here. The reason is that because we want to have this, okay, init stat, because we want to only the stateful widget has this init stat. We want to utilize this because, okay, let's take a look the behavior of init stat. Init stat is a special method whereby it will be executed only once, which is for the first time a widget is constructed. That's it. Okay, and then so far what we learn is set stat, right? Set stat is another special method whereby it executes when uh, we execute it when we want to signal the widget to let it renders or rebuild itself. So in our case, we need to convert, we need to use a summary screen as a stateful, just because we want to have this init stat, and then later on we can plug in or we can put our fetch data inside here. Okay, so again, this is the code of fetch data again here. Although we have fetch data, but here I rewrite the fetch data with underscore fetch data. Okay, the reason is because this one. Okay, we know that fetch data is a synchronous operation, right? Okay, because inside fetch data we have http.get. http.get is asynchronous, so call the function also asynchronous. Now we put this asynchronous operation here. Okay, if we, in fact, we can simply you might be thinking, why don't we put something like this here? Sorry, I need to check this one. Right, okay, now the problem arises here. If you put something like this, then this init stat must be asynchronous. Okay, however, Flutter doesn't support that. You cannot put asynchronous. I mean, to solve the problem, yeah, you need to put async here, right? This is the way you want to use await. Even though you can compile this, but when you run this, then you get an error. So Flutter doesn't allow you to do that. So to work around, that's why I introduce. I leverage that here, and my own function. Okay, and then I create a sync here so that it can comply with await and then a sync here. Then I can do all the this is the same from the previous example, whereby we store the data into dedicated variables. However, now these variables now are not global, but it is actually a attribute inside summary screen. Okay, we're done with that. And then finally, we need to instruct set state. This is to trigger the summary screen to get rebuilt. Okay, in fact, it's not get rebuilt, but it's just to build, because that one is set state. We call it only inside fetch data, and in fetch data we plug it inside init state, and then init state is only executed once, which is the first time the widget or the screen is built. Okay, so that's some points that I need to highlight here. And then also some other important things, as if you notice here, okay, I use something like this. This is actually to avoid errors, because this part will be executed for the first time. You get error, you get null, empty. So to make sure that we don't break the application, so we check here if the evaluator is null. That means if the data is still empty, then we display text empty. Okay, otherwise use the evaluator name. If you simply use evaluator name, and then of course you are going to get errors, because if evaluator is null, then null.fullname is incorrect. So to be safe, so that's why we use something like this. Okay, so now we also break the router part, because we have changed the signature of the summary screen. Okay, so simplest way, we just copy from the snippet, copy this, but in fact you just need to change this part, this one. It's no longer needed data from the global variables. Like this one, we get from the global variables. Okay, so now summary screen is standalone, because it will be doing the fetching the data from the internet inside its widget. So I'm going to replace this. Okay, so I think everything's looking good. So now let's get hot restart. Then I'm pause the video now. Okay, now I'm back. I'll be back to program. So this is the result after I hot restarted the program. So it seems it's working fine. So I think we done for task 2B. So we can I think I can commit this with something like task to be completed. Okay, we done for the fetching data from the internet. Just now we fetch data from summary screen and pass the data to another screen. So in fact, this one is not a efficient solution, okay, for this kind of application, but for the demonstration purposes only, is good enough, because in this case we don't use proper state management. We simply use stateful widget here. But I want to discuss something regarding this. So in fact, later on, this can be further improved with a proper state management, something like, I think provider is a good choice for this. So if you want to implement a provider, okay, provider is supposed to be something like this. It works like the same what the previous examples gives you an idea to proceed with provider. Basically, we just simply move the state into another part. Okay, instead of under the screen. Okay. We can move the state on inside another holder. Okay, you can use here. We are going here. We consider we use provider, so we can use state. We can hold the state inside the provider, okay? And then you put provider as a parent for the application itself. Okay, so then once we have that, so everything, well, every widget have access to the state you want to set or you want to get from the widget. So this is actually much better solution for dealing this kind of application. Use a proper step management like provider here, and then let the provider hold and then handle the state. Okay, and then if the state change, then the provider just need to notify the what we call listeners, like in this case screen 1, screen 2, or some other widgets here. Okay, but we are not going to implement this in this okay. So the next demo is about again to reorganize the code, but this time we are going to focus on the UI, okay, rather than the data. So we are going to change the construction of the screen, the main screen, which is summer screen, by using this widget, FutureBuilder. Okay. Basically, FutureBuilder is a widget that depends on a future data. So in our case, our future data is data fetched from the HTTP, from the internet via the HTTP. So FutureBuilder FutureBuilder widget will get triggered or to perform its build method when it receives a future data. Okay. This is in fact there is another widget that works in the same principle, but in better way, which is Stream Builder. Okay, Stream Builder, as you may guess from the name, the Future Builder depends on future, Stream Builder depends on stream. In order to understand a Stream Builder, it's better to get started from the Future Builder. The working principle is the same. The only difference is the data that they are depending on. So FutureBuilder will get triggered to perform its build method when it receives a future data. Okay. In order to use this widget, you need to set up two things. The first one is the future, which is the data or future data that this widget is depending on. So in our case, it will be the result from the HTTP GET. Okay. And then this is the data that this widget depending on, the future. And you also need to specify the builder, which is what this widget need to build when a future data arrives. Okay, the builder. This is for the UI part. Okay. So let's get started to continue that task, which is the future builder. What we need to do here, in fact, it is just the summary screen. We don't change the data. The way we access data is remain the same. They remain unchanged, but what we want to change here is only, okay, it's only the way we build the widget, we build the screen. Okay, so here, as you can see here, we replace data. We are going to replace with future. So let's take a look what we have currently inside the screen. Let's go to the screen, and and summary. So as you can see here, we for the current implementation, we simply build scaffold inside the screen, okay, summary screen. So what we want to change here is actually to wrap the scaffold. Okay, we want to wrap inside a FutureBuilder. Okay, and then we need to specify we need to set up two things: the future, which is the data, which is here in our case future data, whereby future data is coming from, okay, I think let's copy this first. I think I need just copy this, then I'm going to explain from the VS Code. See only this part, the entire code, and then we're going to change summary, change everything here. Okay, take a look for the future. Then we are going to use future, and then future is the data that this builder is depending on, which is here, future data. But future data is a type of future. You must specify data as a type of future. And then the builder is actually the UI part. So we do some logic here. Okay, the future builder has two parameters, has two arguments. It will accept two arguments. The first one is context. Context is used for building UI, and snapshot is used for data handling. So for example, something like this, right? Okay. First, you need to detect whether the snapshot has data. If it has data, then we can start grab the data. Okay, something like this. We get the data, and then pull, and then we put inside another variable. Okay, evaluator assessment criteria, as actually we don't have to have these variables, but I purposely introduce here just for convenience. Okay, so otherwise, if you don't have this, later on inside your code you keep using snapshot.data assessment, so the writing is quite long, right? So I don't prefer that way. So what I do is create a convenience variable. Is just to just for syntax, basically, to shorten the variables. Okay, so that I don't have to, whenever I need to refer to evaluator name, I don't have to write snapshot.data square bracket evaluator dot full name. So it's quite long, right? So you just simply evaluator. Okay, it's just convenient. They are just convenient variables. Okay, so and then the rest is basically just we return the building part, something like this. Okay? We wrap we wrap the existing building inside FutureBuilder. Okay, then when we hot restart, we should get the same result, something like this. I just hot restarted the program, and then I got the same result, because we don't change anything regarding the display, but we only change the way we implement the build of the UI. Okay, now we are going to move on to I think the most important task in this demo, because your exercise will be based on this. We're going to fetch data from an API server. So for information, API server basically is like a web server, but it serves API or application programming interface. Okay, so normally API server is used for communicating between application and server. For normal web server, the communication is basically the web server itself and the web browser. But for API, is normally consumed by application like single page application, Flutter application. So to communicate with the server, we use this strategy, which is we communicate by using what we call API. Okay, so this is more important for this video. I hope you can focus and put some effort or sometimes to watch and then try to follow this video. So what we are going to implement for this task is to do the same application, but now the data is coming from a server. So the communication is done with HTTP. Okay, HTTP, we are still using HTTP, but we are going to use a standard, more standard communication, okay, which is what we call REST. Regarding this, since REST is another topic, so before we start doing this task, I'm going to give you a lecture on the topic of REST later after this explanation. And we are utilizing HTTP for the communication and also the data we communicate between for request and response between these two parties. Are going to use JSON, because a web server support multimedia files, right? You can send XML, HTML, JSON as well. But in our case, we are going to use JSON because JSON only caters on content. Okay? We are not going to cater about the styling, structure of the document, color, and so on. Okay? That one will be dealt with our Flutter app. Okay, what else? Okay, regarding the server, since we are going to set up a server, we are going to set up a pack server, whereby we are in this case we are going to set up a JSON, or called JSON server. It's basically a kind of API server which is run on HTTP. And the database, we going to implement a NoSQL like database. Okay, it's not really, even though it's slightly different from what you familiar with SQL, but if you learn JavaScript and then you learn JSON, you are going to be familiar with it quite easily. Okay, so we are going. Why I use NoSQL? Because this is the only format supported by JSON server. Why I use JSON server? Because I don't want to set up server to spend a lot of time just to set up the server. Here, less than 1 minute, you can have a server without do a coding basically. So that's why I choose this setup, this configuration. Okay, so as I mentioned just now, next part, the next task is about uh, uh, fetching data from API server. So next I'm going to give a brief lecture on REST. Okay? Before we get started to this task. Okay. Okay, so let's move on to the introduction to REST. So here we are going to look at what is REST, why REST, and then some guidelines in using REST. And then at the end of this lecture, I'm going to show you examples. I think this is more important to uh, to learn this. But if you already familiar with this, I would recommend you to skip this slide, and then you proceed to the implementation of fetching data from from API server. Okay, let's get started. So what is REST? So REST stands for representational state transfer. Okay, don't worry about these terms. It's just terminology introduced for, I think, just to glorify this what we call principles, okay, or architecture style. So REST is not a technical solution basically, but it's just a guideline or principles for to be particular. It is an architecture style which designed for the communication between client and server application. Okay? So REST works or relies on top of a stateless client-server protocol. So mainly HTTP. You can see REST, even though REST can be used with different protocol, but most likely you are using REST with HTTP protocol. And REST is language agnostic or language independent. It doesn't matter whether your front end is JavaScript, your back end is PHP, or your front end is Flutter, your back end is Node.js. It doesn't matter. It doesn't depend on the language, because it's just principles. REST are just principles. So the main role of REST is actually to facilitate the CRUD operations. Okay? Because client and server communicate to deal with data transfer, data access, data manipulation. So the REST is there is to facilitate these operations. Okay, CRUD, which is create, retrieve, update, and delete operations. This is the most common operation dealing with the data. Okay, but keep in mind, REST is actually for the communication part, because the actual operation for doing deleting, updating is done by the back end. Okay, so that is what REST all about. And then why REST is there? What's wrong with HTTP? So let's revisit HTTP. Okay, you learn this from web programming, and also from my previous lecture. I have talked a little bit about HTTP, which is the protocol used that drive the web ecosystem. So let's revisit HTTP. Take this scenario, or take this case as an example. To register a new user, okay, you have many ways with HTTP, right? So you can send something like this to register with register user.php, and then this is a query string, and then you provide the username and also some additional information like age, right? Again, you can have another way. Okay, instead of using register user, you simply use register, because since you can have register, maybe register course, register user, register classes. So you provide what kind of registration you are going to do. You provide another attribute type user, and then extra information for the particular object. Okay, you can also use like regular HTTP request. You can send this using form. You can send using JSON, but instead of using the first two just now, the examples I gave you just now, they are using get method, right? If you don't specify the method, it means it is HTTP get. But here we can change it into post. Okay? By using the first two, you can see the data in the URL. But by using this approach, post, you don't specify the data in the URL. Okay, you don't specify here, but we specify inside the body, so it is hidden from URL. So there is another. You can also use get by using different name. Okay, as you can see here, there are so many ways of doing the same thing, but it's not a good practice. It's not a good idea actually, this one, even though multiple ways can be you provide multiple option to the user, but it's not, in terms of communication, it's not a good way to do this. Because let's say you are approaching in this strategy, so if you are the back-end developers, you need to consider all this operation. So you increase your number of code. Okay, so you don't want to do that. So in fact, by using HTTP alone, you can simply choose only one HTTP request. You don't have to learn the other. For example, you choose only post, okay? And then you don't have to learn the rest of the method. Why? Because you can do all the CRUD operation technically, okay, just post alone. Okay, why? Because this is the beauty of HTTP. We can call it the beauty, or quote unquote the beauty of HTTP, whereby this is the structure, right? Okay, you can have the method here, the URL here, which is the source, and then you can have body. So regardless of request method you are using, it doesn't matter to HTTP. From the perspective of HTTP, it doesn't matter, because, so for example, let's say if you want to update, you can simply use get and then specify the update data here. It still works. Okay. However, this strategy is not a good practice because it violates the HTTP guideline, because HTTP already mentioned that use get to retrieve data, use post to submit a new data, use put to replace the data, but still that one is only guideline. So it depends on the developers, whether the developers wants to follow it or not. Okay, so if you are developing your front end and your back end, you are the one do the both things, so it shouldn't be a problem, because you are the one to take responsible for that. Okay, but it's a good idea to follow the crowd, follow a good practice of doing things. So by using like get to register a new user is something that violate the guideline of HTTP. So we don't want to follow that. So that's why REST comes in. Okay, as I mentioned just now, REST is just a list of principles. REST let us use HTTP in a more consistent and standard way. Okay, this is one of the most important role of REST. Okay, it allows us to follow standard and consistent way of accessing or dealing with our backend. Okay, there are some guidelines. Okay, so some guideline or best practices associated with REST. The first one is communicate with JSON, because HTTP is multimedia, right? HTTP can accept XML, SML, HTML, and so on, JSON. But REST requires us to send even the request and also the response with JSON format. Second, when we define our endpoint, which is the URL, something like your endpoint, use nouns, which indicates object. We prefer objects rather than actions. So, or use nouns instead of verbs. So for example, okay, why is that? Okay, this is the reason. Because the action has already been indicated by the HTTP request, right? So we no longer need to specify our action inside our URL. So let's take a look back here. As you can see, let me show you what I mean. This is register user. Okay, register user. This indicate actions, right? This indicate action. So if you the same goes here, register, but we use get is bylet. It's quite confusing, even though it still work. Okay. So in conventional HTTP, you normally use action or verb rather than noun. However, in JSON, use nouns because the action or the verb has been taken care by the HTTP request method. So what I mean, please recall this. We have seen this from previous lecture. Use get to just to retrieve data. Use post to send a new data, newly created data. Use post to ask the server to create a new data. Use put to replace the entire existing data. Use patch to replace or to update certain attributes from an existing data, and then the rest head and delete, some other method you can read from here. Okay, so coming back to our previous example, to register a new user. So it's a good way. It is better to name the path as /users instead of register user, because we prefer to use nouns. Okay, REST prefer to use nouns. So, and then since it's something to do with new data, so the best method you need to use for this is pause. So the request should be looking like this: pause, and then the users, then you provide the data for the new user inside the body. Okay, if you want to update an existing user, use put, but still the endpoint is users, and then you replace the data with the body. You provide the data that for new user in the body. So the difference between put and pause: pause creating a new object, okay, and then put only create put will replace an existing object. And then if you want to retrieve, use get. Then let's say to retrieve a user for a given ID, use get, and then you provide users and then mention the ID of the users. To delete, use the delete method. Okay, next guideline is about collection. Just now I didn't explain why we need to use users rather than user, because that one is another guideline from the rest. When we deal with collection, it's a good idea to name the collections with plural nouns. Okay, so what is collection? Collection, basically, you can consider collection is like a list of objects. So if you talk about SQL, it's a table. So the content of a table is a collection. Let's say you have table of students, so students is collections. It's a collection. So an example, this is an example. Okay, you want to use users here rather than user, because this endpoint normally refers to tables. So this is to get all the users. The first one is to get all the users, specify something like this. To get the user whose ID 5, you specify the users and then the ID. To get the users whose name Tajuddin, so you can use a query string. I believe you also learned this from web programming. So REST also need support. REST also need to support query string. Next guideline is about if you are dealing with nested resource, append a nested resource as the name of the path that comes after the parent resource. Okay, let's take an example. Let's say to get all the contact information for a given user, whereby a user can have multiple contacts. It can have phone, mobile, mail, email, second email, and so on. So you can use something like get, and then users is the collection. Then we pick particular user by specifying the ID, and then we append the nested resource here. This context. This will list all the contacts belongs to user number 5. Okay, next guideline is REST also needs to allow filtering, sorting, and pagination. So for example, to filter operation, get the user who's a given name and age. Okay, so here are the users, and then we filter by using query string. And if you have more than one field, then you can split them with %n. To sorting, sort equal, okay, we sort by keyword sort, but still we are using query string. And then for each field we specify with minus or plus, we indicate plus means ascending, minus means descending. So this example below is to get all users sorted by age, which youngest first, followed by names in order. Okay. And then your REST API should also support this, get users from page 2 origination. So for example, users, you can have a list of users, right? Let's say you have so many users and then you want to send only a certain page, so use REST API supposed to be supporting this kind of origination. You specify page and equal what page you are going to deliver. So you can also have page 2 to 4, okay, page 2 minus 4, something like that. Okay, REST guideline also need, in REST guideline we also when you develop your REST API, you should consider error handling. You should also put error handling in priority. Okay. So in this case, when dealing in errors, return standard errors code. In fact, it's a good one of the recommendation when dealing with REST errors. You simply return the standard errors. You don't process the error here and then you give your custom error message. Okay. The best practice is you simply, if there is an error, you just return error defined by HTTP. You don't have to create your custom error. Let the client to handle the error. If you are creating your own custom error message, then you need to provide documentation for that. So it will be wasting of time, right? So it is a must, okay, sort of a must to do error handling. However, the way you want to handle it is, it's better to you don't do error handling inside your server API. You just provide standard errors, okay, it's defined inside HTTP status code. So these are some example errors that commonly produced by the backend. Okay. Please recall HTTP response have 5 categories of errors. The last 2 categories are meant for error handling, so for the client error and server error. Okay. Okay, some other best practices. Okay, make sure you, when you develop your REST API, maintain good security practices. So for example, it is always recommended to use HTTPS, okay, so to provide more secure transaction. And then you can try implement caching to improve performance, because by using caching it allows data retrieval faster. Okay. And you also need to adopt versioning. Okay, you need to version your APIs. The reason for this is because to prevent breaking the client's code. Okay, let's say the client should let's say you are implementing a new version of your backend API. If you force everyone to use the new API, so it is most likely break the client code. Okay, the client code most likely cannot work. Okay, so to prevent that happening, so use versioning. Okay, so you have version 1, version 2, and then for existing user, maybe you just ask them to use this version 1. For new user or for new update, you ask them to use the version 2. This is actually a good strategy to pass out all endpoints gradually, okay, instead of forcing everyone to the new API. Okay, so just now I laid out some best practices in implementing REST as API. As I mentioned, REST is just guidelines. It still depends on the developers whether they follow the guidelines or not. Okay, but to be a good developer, it's better to follow some good standard because everyone is following the same. Okay, the next part will be about working on REST, how to use REST by learning from examples. So in order to do that, so you need I actually have provided some sample instruction. So we are going to do this. We are going to move on to the next branch, is fetch from API, because this branch has already some sample code for REST. Okay, so later we are going to check out this code base, and then after that we need to set up an API server. In this case, we are going to set up an effect API. In order to do that, we are going to use JSON Server, which is a tool to set up local API server on our machine. It is basically a Node.js software. So in order to install the JSON server, you must have first Node.js installed on your machine. So I'm not going to walk through you this. You just click on this, and then you go to this site, and then if you not install yet this application, this Node.js, you can do it that after this. Okay, install Node.js. Okay, I already installed on my PC. Once we have that, then you go to this site, okay, to see the guideline how to install JSON server. I think we can go from here. It's straightforward basically. So this is the site. It gives you the step by step how to install this server. You can follow along. In fact, you don't have actually to read everything here. You start from, this is how you install npm install. Just type this. Okay, where you want to type this, you can type from PowerShell or You can try from git bash or from command prompt. Okay, then you also need to have your db.json. You don't have to do this because I will provide for you this db.json. Okay, you just need to install node.js and then install this one. And then when you run, you don't follow this. Okay, I will show you later, because this one is configuration for running on local machine, and then you access from your web browser. Okay, so you are safe to use localhost for this case. But later on I'm going to show you how to run whereby you are going to run locally, but you need to access from your emulator, right? So I need to close this. Okay, we are going to create JSON data. Later you don't have to, for now you don't have to worry about this. We just simply use the data that I give you, and then after that we are going to run the server, something like this is from your git bash or from your PowerShell. Okay, I think let's start with check out this first. Okay, I'm going to do it here. Okay, okay, we are going to check out to another branch, but before you do that, make sure you already committed this one. I already done that for this. You just now I commit the changes that I made for this program. So we are going to check out another branch, which is fetch from is the API, API server. Okay, then let's take a look at the folder. So I already provide the database. This is the file for the database. Okay, we are going to run this here, and also inside here we have a folder called REST client. This under the project folder, REST client, and then inside this folder we have two files. One is to learn REST example, so we are going to use this file. But in order, before that, we need to set up our server. Okay, I already do this. Okay, I already installed Node.js, I already installed JSON Server, but now I need to run my server. Okay, in order to run your server, don't use localhost. Okay, because later on we are going to access the server from the emulator, and then if you type localhost, that means the server only expect you to send requests from localhost. Okay, which means the localhost for the server is the PC itself. But if you want to send requests from emulator, and then you try to send requests by typing localhost, now the localhost at that moment is the emulator itself, it's not the PC. So that's why it's a good idea to use IP address then localhost, because localhost is basically what we call loop back IP address. It doesn't go outside, it just loop back within your node. Okay, so how you determine your IP address? You can simply determine from let me check if we can do it from a git bash ipconfig. For some reason it doesn't work for my for this. I'm not sure why. Let me try to okay, ipconfig. Yeah, we can also check from here, ipconfig, or if you cannot find from here, then you type from command prompt. Try to find your IP address, something like this. This is okay, so this is my IP address. Okay, so we are going to use this as the IP address instead of localhost. So I'm going to copy this. Done. Okay, so in my case I need to open a new bash so that I still can have my git the other side. So I just type JSON Server, the host one, and then what file I need to serve, db.json. Okay. Okay, okay, now the server is running now. Okay, so it seems to be fine. Okay, so we can now start exploring the REST request. Okay, but before that, let me going back here. Okay, just now what we did is just to set up API server. Okay. The database already there. I already created a database. For this moment, I'm not going to explain that yet. I'm going to explain that later. Okay. So alternatively, if you don't want to use local machine, you can use this online JSON server. Okay, I already created. You can create on your own basically. Okay, the way you want to create your own JSON server online, you need to create on GitHub to create a repo on GitHub, and then you want to make sure on your GitHub you put your database.json on the top folder. Okay, meaning that under the GitHub repo, and then you put inside db.json, and then you go to this website, you type something like this, your repo. Okay, so my JSON server tpcode.com, and then my ID name, and then followed by my repo name. In my case, I already uploaded to GitHub, and then in this repo I already have db.json. So if I go here, okay, just now I cannot click directly from the link. I need to copy the URL and go directly to from. This is supposed to be the things that you get when you go to the link I got just now. So in my database, I have provided a list of collections, but for our example, we are going to look at only for these users. Something like this is the data that we get from the database. Okay, so if you don't want to install local, so you can use this, or you can create setup on your own. But keep in mind, when you do this, when you use this, you can have REST request and response. They working fine. However, when you do some update, changes on your database, they will not be updated permanently. Okay, so that's why it is better to use local. But if you want to just to check out what data we have inside, and you can simply sign. And then again, we are going to use this extension REST client to do REST testing our REST API. But if you don't want to use REST client, you can use conventional tools. Okay, this is another tools. This is most popular tools for REST community, Postman. But I prefer to use this one because it provides you a CLI base. You don't, but Postman is a GUI base, so you can use. I prefer to use CLI, and then I can work directly from VS Code. So it's a good thing, at least to me. So, but if you still want to take a look what is a Postman, you can go to this website. And then we are going to work on this for we are going to use this file learning REST example. Okay, we are going to open this. Okay, now let's take a look the example. So for now I'm going to close everything because I'm not going to use it anymore for this moment. So I already opened this file learning REST. Okay, so the server is running now. Okay, so here if you want, okay, you can simply use the REST API. If you want to test the REST API, you can simply you type directly from the website. It is on port 3000, something like this. Let's say I want to refer users. This will give me users, all the users. Then if I want to take only the first user, okay, then we get the first user. However, this approach only allows us to deal with the get method. Okay? So we don't have access to post, put, and so on. If you want to do that, then you need to create a front-end application, like you create a form. That's where REST client comes in. Okay? So if I want to do the same, I can simply do it here. HTTP my IP address. Okay, I already have this. Okay, I just copy this. And this server is listening on port 3000. So users. So when I run this, I can simply run this. By the way, just send request. So let's wait. So it give me, supposed to giving me the result here. See, so this is the list of users. So this is the HTTP request, and then this is the HTTP response. Okay, to work in a more convenient way with REST, it's a good idea to specify the URL in variables, because like I did here. Why? Because maybe you want to change your server, right? So in my case, I'm using Wi-Fi, so sometimes my IP address got changed because it is DHC, the dynamic IP. So every time I change the IP, then I need to change here. So if I have so many requests here, it fixed address, so I need to change everything. So by having global variables, something like this, you just need to change here. Then you interpolate into the corresponding request. So here I define my best URL. This is how you do it in this is supported syntax in REST client. Okay. If you want to use my online server, you just open this and then close this. In my case, I'm going to use my local server. Now let's get started. The first one, the first example, to get the list of users, we have done this. So you get and then remember the principles of REST. It prefers nouns. So get users, this is to get the list of users. We have done this here. To get specific user, you just get users and then put the ID. Okay, here I don't need to run this. If I want to create a new user, so I need to use post, right? Because post will be creating a new entity. Okay, we asking for the server to create a new entity. Here I'm going to create a new user. So let's see what. By the way, just now we send post. Every time it responds, it gives us status to 100. Let's see what happened when we send request post. So as you can see here, it returns 201. This is a standard response for post, when it means that the server has successfully created a new record. Okay? And then it also returns the record that has been created. This is don't confuse with this. This is the one that you give to the user, to the server. As you can see here, we don't specify the ID because we don't know what the ID that will be given by the server. The client also only needs to specify the information of the user without the ID. Then the server will be creating that and then giving it a running ID here. Okay, so and then when it responds to the client, it responds the data that has created in the server along with the ID. This is post. Okay, for put basically is to replace the entire user. So be careful when using put, because when you use put, you must specify all the attributes. Okay? Here we want to update user, or want to replace user 5. So you need to specify the name, all the attributes. Let's say you only want to specify the full name, something like John Maxwell. Okay, let's see what happened. So as you can see here, we want to maintain the short name to John, right? But what happened? John, the short name now is gone. So because the principle of put is basically to replace the entire object. Okay, so that's why we get something like this. Okay. It replace the object with short name and full name just now with a new object with full name, with only has full name. If you mean something like this, then you need to use patch instead, something like this. So let me do again. So going back to this, let's say if you want to change only the full name, so I can use patch. So as you can see, the short name remains with John, but we just change the full name. And then finally, if you want to delete, simply delete method. That's it. Okay, I think that's it for the examples of phrase. Okay, now we are going to do the task number 4, but still before we do that, I'm going to explain some upgrade version, okay, about the data that we are going to deal with, so that you are clear with what we are doing here. So the application is still the same, which is PSA, PSS, peer and self-assessment application, but we are going to upgrade a little bit. Okay, in this case, now the application can have can support multiple types of assessment. Okay, it's not only for team working, it can also be used for pair programming and so on. So for example, okay, the main upgrade that we are going to do for the application is to support multiple assessment activities. So for example, we are going to have different activities. So what I mean activity is basically an assessment activity. So let's say in group project, you will have deliverable 1, deliverable 2, and so on. All of them are called, I term them activities. So again, in exercise 1, exercise 2, exercise 3, there are activities and then need assessment. So each assessment activity has its own assessment criteria and scales. Okay, this is the same. Okay, we maintain this. The only changes here now, because each activity can vary from one to another, so the way we assess and the scale that we are using for the assessment is different. So that's why each assessment activity needs to have their own assessment criteria and scales. And then we are going to use a NoSQL database. Okay, we are going to use a Fact API server to host our database. Okay, so in our case, it's a NoSQL database. Okay, NoSQL is basically a collection of collections, a list of collections, whereby each collection is, you can consider like a table in SQL world, but in NoSQL world, we call it collections. So our collection in this application is activities, assessments, forms, and users. And then each collection contains a list of documents. Okay, you can think of a document as a row or a record in SQL world. So this is an example. The first example is activity, group project, team working. Okay, whereby here we have for each activity has evaluator, one evaluator, and then it has 4 assessment. And then each assessment has their own criteria. Each assessment needs to be assessed by a certain list of criteria, and then the criteria has its own scale. And then this is another type of, as example 2 is another type of uh, activity. Now it is a exercise pair programming, and then it, for each assessment it has only two member, two assessment to for each activity, and then this activity is using different criteria and different scale. Okay, so let's take a look at the database design. Okay, so we have a list of collection. First is activities. Activities consist of ID, title. Okay, the title is basically we use title for this one. Okay, okay, this is and then this is for evaluator, and this is for the assessment list. Okay, so the ID, title, and evaluator ID. Okay, this is to link to the evaluator. We don't use the name of evaluator here. This is actually to comply with the JSON server, because JSON server is very limited feature. So if you want to, this is the way you need to structure your database to work with JSON server. It's a flat database. You cannot have very nested object. You can store nested object basically, but later on it's very difficult to query the nested object. So that's why the best way I can think of for our application is organizing in this way. And then we have users collection, and then the user is used in two ways. One is inside the activity. The user inside the activity is called evaluator. Okay, it has many to one. One activity can have many evaluators. Okay, so sorry, it's not one user can have many activities, but one activity can only have one evaluator. And then form we assign to here. We store, yeah, we relate activities to form by form ID. And then for the assessment, okay, the assessment, which is the box, which is in the main screen. For assessment, okay, basically the relationship is between the activities and users. Just now I mentioned users in this application is used for two purposes. One is for the evaluator, and the other one is for members. So regarding activities and evaluator, it should be fine in this way. And then for activities and members, because one assessment activity has multiple members, right? Okay, so and then the same user can be in different activities. So that means relationship between activities and members is many to many. So it's very difficult to model that it's only with this table. So the solution for that, we introduce another collection, okay, which is, I call it this assessment. Now it forms one to many. One activity can have many assessment, and then for each assessment, one assessment can have many user. Okay, so now we have something like this. Okay, now we are going to implement this in our database. So the database already here, yeah, the same database I showed you just now. Okay, now we are going to test the database. It is the same what we did just now with the JSON server. Okay, we already run that server, and we are going to test the test database http.http. Okay, so I'm going to open this file, which is test database. So we just straight away go to this. Okay, so for the main screen, you can see from the main screen to build this. This is the uh, request that you need to send. Okay, the main screen. You need to send because this one is the list of members. Okay, then you need to send get the activities number 1. So for example, we are dealing with only for for this version, we only consider the activity number by hard coded. We are going to hard code this one. Okay, but the database support for multiple activities, but we are not supporting yet in the application. Okay, so what if I'm pressing this and then okay, by the way, if you can see from here, when you get this, right, what we have here is ID, title, form ID, and evaluator ID. Especially for evaluator, you want to have the evaluator name, right, not the ID. So that's why you need to do name lookup solution. So for example, we supposed to have a resolution lookup resolution for this evaluator. So just now, what is the ID? The ID is 1. So I need to send, okay, forgot to specify here. Maybe I can send here to get the ID. So you get the name of the evaluator basically from users. Okay, we don't know. Okay, the user is user1. So this is how you do it. You can do it something like this. Send. Now we get, this is the evaluator for the first activity. We need to, that means this one need to be done in client. Okay, we are going to do lookup resolution at the client side. Although in the beginning of this video I mentioned you're supposed to be doing that at the backend side, right? But however, for this particular exercise demo, the server we are using is coming from other people's server. We're not the one that we are developing on our own, so we don't have full of control on that. So we don't have the option to write the code for the server. So in that case, you need to do it at the lookup resolution at the at the client side. Okay, so now we can get this. How to get this? Okay, because you don't see from the activity here, right? You don't see from the activity. This one, the activity doesn't show you the it doesn't show us the list of members. So the way you want to get that is actually you can get from the assessment. Okay. First of all, let's take a look what we have in here. Okay. This is the collection, all the assessment. That means this one consists of assessment from activity 1, activity 2, because we only have 2 activities here. Okay. So in order to get the activity 1, just now it's activity 1, you can simply use query string assessment and get only assessment belongs to activity ID 1. Okay. So now we get, where is it? Okay, now we just take only the activity 1. So inside this assessment, you have the ID and also member ID. Again, member ID, what we need is member name, right? Something like this, member name, full name. But what the assessment give us is member ID. So that means you also need to do lookup resolution for this. We need to change member ID into member short name and full name. Okay. And finally, this is about to when we update, okay, when we do changes on the here you do something, right, and then you save, you need to update this. And also you need to update the UI. Also you need to update the server. So the request that you need to send is use patch. For this case is you need to because you want to update the assessment, because this one belongs to the assessment, but you just need to update the points. Okay. So this is the how you do it. You patch, but you just need to update the points attribute. Okay. So this complete our example of using the database. So we are doing it manually on REST client, and then next we are going to implement in our code. Okay, so what we are going to do to achieve this task is, first we need to update the model classes to reflect to the changes of the upgraded database. We need to update because our previous implementation, we assume the data has been pre-processed, but here next we are going to implement a little bit like a real application whereby the data is something like that. You need to resolve it on your own. Okay, then we need to add a class to make it more modular, class that handles services regarding data manipulation. So we are going to add we call it DataService. Okay, for this purpose. And then finally we just need to update the summary screen, okay, because the rest is the same. And then the final program should be looking something like this. Okay, we are going to update our model class. Okay, model class, all this we need to update this, and also to change summary. we need and a new folder. I introduce a new folder here, services. So far we work on model, screen, so now services. Services basically is something to do with operation at the back end, operation with the outside of the application. It can be coming from the files, coming from local resource, coming from the Firebase, coming from any other than the application itself. So anything that related to that particular task, you want to put it in this folder, screens. So but for now we just have this service, data service, whereby this service will be dealing for handling REST requests for database manipulation. Okay, so let's do that. So basically we what we need to do to update the model classes, the assessment, okay, form, and so on. Okay, let's take a look at this. Okay, although our database, okay, consists of so let's take a look our, where is it, the activity. Do we have activity? Okay, activity. Although this database, just now I showed you, instead of evaluator, here we have evaluator ID, right, for the database. Okay, we need to design in that way because to comply with the JSON server. Okay, but in our model we still use the actual object. Okay, I prefer this is a better approach because we don't want to to modify so much on our existing code. Okay, so but the problem now, it doesn't reflect with the database, it doesn't comply with the database. So that's why we need in the middle here. Okay, before going to this object, we need to do lookup resolution. Okay, so but first of all, let's modify our code. But basically for the model class, what we change on, mainly we add ID, something like that. The rest is the same. So I'm going to only copy this. Going to copy this. And then we are going to do it. We are going to save in particular file. So just now, assessment. Okay, so we changed the assessment. Okay, so again, okay, one more thing I want to point out here. I change for the percentage. I change this into here because we want the application to support multiple types of activity, whereby each activity has its own criteria and scale. So in previous implementation, we simply assume the form has 5 criteria, and each criteria has 4 value. The maximum value is 4. That's why the maximum score is 20, always 20. But now we can have different activities. So that's why in order to do that, I modify this by using by allowing this function to accept the maximum score rather than fixing it with 20. So here and then we are going to set this later in the summary screen. Okay, what else I need? For the form, the same goes to the form. We just add the ID. Okay, by the way, as you can notice here, I don't just now I mentioned we need to do resolution, right? Lookup resolution, but you don't do resolution inside your model. Let the model only to represent your model, not doing anything regarding accessing to the database. Accessing to the database is to be done by the data service. Okay, so I copy this, and then I need to change the is it form? I think it is form. This form. Okay, it is the same. Again, the same here. We just simply add ID. Okay. Then the form has scales criteria. We just add ID for that particular file, particular class. And then activity is a new one I just introduced in this task. Okay, so we are going to have this. So we need to copy this, and then go to the model, create a new one, which is we call it activity dot dat. Okay. So we just paste. You can go through again on your own here to look at what I'm doing with this code. Okay, on your own time. So it's basically the same. We again here, even though in the database we are using ID, but in the model we are going to model the object itself rather than the ID, because before this process we assume we have another process, which is to resolve the ID into the object. Okay, we're done with that. And then the model is done. Now let's take a look what we have. So now we need to comply with the summary. Okay, because we have some errors. I think something somewhere here. Here, because we just now we already changed the percentage way. Okay, percentage now needs the maximum score. So how to get the maximum score? Okay, so okay, later on we are going to we just copy this. The maximum score is calculated with where is it? I think wait. Yeah, I think I just copy it first. Then summary, we change everything. Okay, so the way you calculate the percentage is now something like this. Okay, this is the because percentage now needs to accept a maximum score. Okay, but for now we assume fixed 20 just to satisfy the syntax. Okay, later on we are going to change this with actual value. Okay, yeah. Okay, next is let's try to compile this just to make sure everything is working. Okay, let's try to restart. Okay, it is working. So as you can see here, this is the fetching from the database. Just now you see that because of the future builder, in the future builder, mainly in summary, we have condition whereby if the data is already available, then we draw the screen or we build the screen. Otherwise, show progress indicator. So something like, where is it? Something like build main screen here. Okay. If the data is ready, then build main screen. Otherwise, build fetching data screen, which is the progress indicator. Okay. Main screen. This is basically we are doing conditional building. If the data is already available, then we can start to the actual building with main screen. Otherwise, I don't use if else here because the return itself can be used without the else, right? I don't have to explain to you that. Okay? I hope you can recall your knowledge on in the syntax of if and return. Okay, so now we need to move on to the update the data service. Okay, going to update the data service, which is add data service class to handle REST requests. Okay, so this is a new one. Okay, so for now I just copy it first and then I will explain from the VS Code. So we need to create, this is a new one, totally new one. So we need to create another folder, call it, not inside the screen, but it's supposed to under it, call it services. And inside services, then you can create file data service.dat. What services folder does is basically to hold all the code that related to services. So you can think of services like anything that outside from the UI. So accessing to Firebase, do authentication, picking image gallery. Those are examples of services. So if you have that kind of class in your application, then you can create or define the dedicated class and then you put that class or a code inside this folder services. So but for now we just want to focus on services regarding the data. So what we have here, I have data service. This is the main main service basically for this application. Okay, so this is the same what we did for just accessing paging from the data, paging from the database, the internet. So here what I need to do here, I create a class, I call it a data service. Okay, and then inside this class I define some convenient variables, convenient attributes, so something like this URL, so to allow me to change this data accordingly. So let's say I want to change this to my local server, so I'm going to use the first one. Okay, now the next part is about HTTP request. So this is just again, this is just convenient or help method. Okay, because we are going to do getting and posting many times, so it's a good idea to have a convenient or helper method to do that. So although HTTP can already has get, but here is just to facilitate the HTTP get. Just want to create a convenient method. So here is for the get. Since here in our case we only have get, which is getting data for particular screen, and also patch. Okay, we don't have pause here, we don't have delete in this application, we don't have put. So if your application, example for your exercise letter, you need to delete data, you also need to implement, you need to extend this. So for our case, for this demo, we just need to have get and also patch. Okay, if I want to extend this, let's say I want to do for the put, I just create another one, put, same the rest. Okay, so but again you must make sure to use put method, HTTP method, and then make sure you want to keep checking the status code before start proceeding. Do something like that. And then again, if you want to do for the delete, you also need to specify the delete operation. Extend with the delete. Okay, you just simply, you can use any name for this name actually, but to make it more consistent, we want to consistent with the name of the HTTP. Delete. Okay, so delete operation, and then you need to provide the delete. Of course, for the delete you don't have to provide the body, but only the URL, something like that. Okay, you can do it in that way. Okay, so the method that I showed you just now is just helper methods to facilitate the call to the HTTP request. So it's a good idea to have this kind of method. In fact, if you only use that method only once, you don't need to have this method, but it's a good idea to have one basically, especially for our case. For getting, we are going to use get quite a lot. So for example, to get the first screen, you need to get, and then later on you need to do resolution, right? Because when you get the activity, you just get the evaluator ID, then you need to get the object by invoking another request. In that case, you also need to use the get method. So that's why it's a good idea to have a dedicated helper method for that, so make our job much easier. Okay, so let me remove because we are not going to use this in this project, but in your exercise letter you might need to use that, okay, because you need to delete something or you need to update something, so you need to extend that. Okay, then this is the more higher level, view. Just now this method only to facilitate the REST call, but now we have another helper method. This is to work specifically for particular objects. Like I want to create dedicated function to get activity. So because by using get here is very general, is it the get here, you need to specify the endpoint to make it more intuitive. So I created a new method, get activity. So by the name itself, you know, get activity, what activity that you want to get. So you need to specify only the ID. Okay, Then we use the helper method just now, get something like this. So as you can see here, get activity, and then you put ID. This is the same what we did from this client just now. And then JSON here, this JSON is I think it's better. Let's try to run from here if we can find something. Okay, I just now tried to put breakpoint here, but it doesn't work, so never mind. So let me continue. So when we get activity, what we get here is actually a list of attributes from activities. So okay, I think let me open the the one that I showed you in the code just now is similar to something like this. So when we send this request activities, so what we get is something like this, right? Only IDs. For the form is ID and evaluate is ID. So that's why we need, okay, here we need to do resolution, okay? Because we get ID and then we need to convert into object. Then we do it by it's not convert to object, but to resolve to get its proper attributes. Okay, not converting yet to object. It's still inside. It's still in the form of JSON map. So we need to resolve the evaluator ID and form ID to their details data. Okay, then again same. Okay, for the assessment, to get the assessment, then we invoke something like, okay, get the assessment, which the activity ID is ID. It will put here, and then again, because when we do this, what we get is just a list of member ID, right? Then we again, you also need to resolve each member ID by doing the same. But here we are using loop, because we don't know how many items inside this assessment. It can be 4, it can be 2, and so on. And then another helper method. This is helper method for assisting the main screen, which is to get activity, because the data from here is coming from the activity. Then here another helper method is to facilitate the update. When the user clicks save, then we need to update, right? Update here and also update the database. So in order to update the database, this is the helper method. We just need to update the points, okay? Because the changes only happen to the points. So here we send page for assessment, and then and we need to in fact this one no needed, because we the idea why I put here is just to, in case you want to process your result from your page, because this page, once you send request page, it will be do the patching at the back end, and then it will respond with some JSON, and then again what you get from the page is it will be giving you the member ID and also the points. So if you need to do further processing at the client for the response, so that's why here I keep using resolution here. But for this particular program, actually we don't use this code, okay? And then finally, to realize the data service, we need to create an object from it. Okay, so for this case, I just created global variables. Okay, it should be okay for this case because we don't hold any state for this service. By the way, when you are thinking of service, you want to make sure service don't hold any state. You don't hold any variables here. Service only to facilitate to get data, to facilitate the UI build. Okay, so you don't do any state management here. You just simply do what the service should do. So in this case, we are dealing with data, so the data service. So this data service is only doing getting data from the backend of a REST standard. Okay. Okay, I think that's all for this video. Okay, finally I managed to finish the video. So let's recap what we learned from this video. Okay, we learned how to fetch data from the internet by using that package HTTP, and also a convenience widget for working with future data. There is a FutureBuilder, whereby in this widget, with this widget, you need to set up the future, which is the data that this widget depending on, and also the builder, which is what this widget should build. Okay. And also we have learned a little bit about REST, okay, to facilitate the communication between client and server, to facilitate the CRUD operation, create, retrieve, update, and delete operation. Okay. REST is just a standard or just a architecture style or principles. It's not a technological thing, but it's just principle. But it's a good idea. It's to follow this standard, so that every developers will see the same page. Finally, we have done on fetching data from API server. In this demo, we were using fetch server, which is set up with JSON server locally. Okay, then you access from your emulator. And also we have done to how to structure the code, okay, in a better way. So actually we have done this starting from the beginning of this project, whereby we organize our code into parts like screens only for UI related, models for data related, and then just now in this video we introduce a new category, which is services, which is something to do with outside of the UI. Okay, so to facilitate the build of UI, so you need service like accessing the database. Maybe you want to do authentication. So authentication is a kind of service. Accessing Firebase is also another service. Loading local file is also another service, and so on. Okay, I think that's all for this demo. And then thank you for your time for if you have listened to this video. And then okay, get ready for your exercise. So your next exercise will be something like the last task, which is fetching data from Fetch API server, and then most likely you will be continuing the to-do list. It is the same application, but now you are going to implement the the data, you are going to store the data on server. Okay, instead of retrieving from hard coded, you are going to retrieve from the server. You are going to use JSON Server. Okay, so in that case, the application will be the same. You can delete, you can add tasks, and then regarding that, in your database on your REST, you also need to comply with that. So it means your REST application can serve for deleting tasks, adding a new task, and so on. Okay, I think that's all for this lecture. I'm quite tired now, so I think that's all. Bye.